listening to the Leadership Woman podcast with me, Jill Saville. And today, my guest is Brian Ballantyne. Welcome, Brian. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hi, Jill. No, pleasure to be here.
And you're currently the regional manager for training programs for Amazon, and also the co-founder for Men for Inclusion, which we'll talk about. How this works is, it would be great if you could start at the beginning and from where you're born. I think you were born in the UK, but I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, it's funny, I've been mistaken for an American or even a German. You know, you go to Mallorca, practice your Spanish, and everyone thinks I'm German and talk to me in German. But yeah, I was born in Newcastle upon Tyne. Mm-hmm. I apparently had an accent until I was about 5, but then as a family, we moved down to Birmingham, and I got a Birmingham accent. And I guess a big thing that happened in my life then was that my mother committed suicide when I was 6, not long after we'd moved to Birmingham. So that's been quite a big feature of my life, or a big thing that happened then. My dad then, remarried, and we kind of merged with another family. So growing up in a multicultural family where everyone had different things going on for them, that was also very formative in terms of, inclusion and diversity and equality. Yeah, so we'll stop talk. Maybe you want to probe on a couple of things.
I just want to stop there because I've known you for a long time, and we said that we would just have this conversation, and immediately you say something that quite floors me.
Sorry.
At 6 years old, your mother committed suicide. So I don't particularly want to probe, but I just want to acknowledge that, yeah, that must have been very difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, we didn't really talk about afterwards. Where, mental health was at the time was that you didn't really talk about things. You just kind of locked them away. And so it's only been recently, maybe in the last 10 years, we've really kind of explored that and done trauma therapy and, advocated for mental health, even though it's very stigmatized and still continues to be. But yeah, that was a big shock.
Yes, I imagine. And these podcasts, these stories are really looking at how you became you. And these kind of things. I know that you're a strong advocate for mental health, and now I see why. So sorry for the interruption. You're in Birmingham. You've got a new family.
That's right.
What happened then?
And I guess with this family as well, like I said, we weren't all white. There was a mix of ethnicities in the family. And my youngest brother was born with cerebral palsy, so we had my youngest brother was disabled, and so growing up, from 10. Thinking about accessibility, thinking about assistive devices. That was very important because when I started my career at Vodafone, working on quite a basic website at the time, I was really an advocate for accessibility. This was 20 years ago, making sure that everyone, whether they had visual or hearing impairments or motor impairments, could use the internet. So that showed up quite quickly, and it's something I'm still involved with now at Amazon. Just a few months ago, being part of an accessibility awareness event, doing a speech and things like that. So while there's the gender and there's the kind of racial inclusion, I think accessibility and disability has always been something important to me, and always kind of showed up.
So what happened after that? Did you leave Birmingham then to go on for studies or something?
Yeah, I went back to Newcastle actually. Went to Northumbria. It's funny when thinking about what university course to do, and now my children are teenagers. I don't know if they'll go to university or what they'll choose, but for me, I did maths, physics and art at A-level, and I was even looking at art college. I was like, I loved oil painting, and I was in Birmingham, there's the Bourneville Art College. I don't think it's there anymore, but I was thinking of doing that, and I had a big conversation with my parents about, you're not going to get a job doing that though, are you? It's very much my parents both, maybe from working class backgrounds, thinking, well, you got to get a job, you got to earn money. How are you going to do that doing oil painting? So maybe I could go into advertising design. So I looked at advertising at Bournemouth, and I looked at marketing at Northumbria, which included just like a year's industrial placement. So I worked at Heinz for a year. So I guess there's partly compromising between what I wanted to do, which was more creative, and what my parents wanted, which was that I got a job and earn money. It's interesting now, I've nearly finished a second degree, and it was arts and humanities with Open University. So I'm still managing to go back to what I planned to do in the first place. that was a key thing. Then, deciding what I wanted versus what my parents wanted, and then going to Northumbria to do quite a vocational degree.
And the thing is that now that we're parents, I certainly can absolutely understand why we fear and we want them to be secure and we want them to get something that they can live on, don't we? So we're sort of the other side of a conversation now.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm thinking about my 14-year-old who missed the last month of school. Fortunately, didn't have to resit the year, but it has no interest in school. Then you kind of think, well, going to university isn't everything, but at the same time, they can't live with us forever. And also, don't want to spoil them either and make them feel entitled. They can just sponge off their parents. So yeah, I think being a parent now, you do look at the other side. You want the best for your child, but a balance between what they want and what's going to be able to let them stand on their own 2 feet.
So you ended up in Newcastle then, and what happened then?
Yeah, so I got did my marketing degree. I did a placement at Heinz. So I was working on baked bean pizzas, which is ironic because I hate baked beans. It's one food I don't like. And Weight Watchers from Heinz desserts and doing packaging design and, even flying. Like I was 19, flying first class to Dundalk to our factory there or to Middlesbrough, sitting in first class lounges as a 19-year-old, getting the taste for the kind of corporate life. Getting Mercedes to go to the advertising agencies. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing like that now. Working at Vodafone and Amazon, it's much more frugal these days. Finishing my degree, I got a job at Vodafone. I'd never owned a mobile phone before, but it seemed like it was the up-and-coming thing. Those really fun years.
And I'm noticing that there's big names that you've been associated with.
Yeah, so I was at Vodafone on the graduate scheme. It was interesting because there's a team of 4 of us looking after the entire website. And I remember someone saying, oh, what a waste of a brain, working on the internet. Clearly at Amazon, we've got more than 4 people working on the internet. Then, I met my wife-to-be. She was a barrister in London. And I was commuting between Newbury and London, which is about 2.5 hours on the train. And then Kate had the chance to go back to Luxembourg to be, a lawyer at the European Court. And I remember the conversation. I was just walking along the park on the way to work. I said, yeah, go for it. I'll just quit my job and follow you. So I didn't really think it through as much as maybe I could have done. So yeah, I quit Vodafone in the UK and just got married and moved to Luxembourg. And this is in 2005. And then spent 5 months looking for a job. So
this is still quite uncommon that men follow their wives, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I guess I thought, well, she might have breaks in her career, and I think maybe we'll have children. So I'll start by taking a break in mine. When I say I'm a trailing spouse in a kind of patriarchal culture, it's usually the woman who follows the man. But at the time, it was pretty unusual. Yeah,
pretty unusual. So you said that was your first stint in Luxembourg. So you disappeared again, did you?
Yeah, we planned to come to Luxembourg for 2 years. Then we had one child and another child. I got a job actually back with Vodafone for 5 years. Had 3 years in London. But life in London compared to Luxembourg was so stressful with 2 children. The daycare didn't open until 8. I wasn't getting to work until after 9. I was always late. And I was looking at this photo of Place Guillaume in the snow. And I said, why don't we move back to Luxembourg? It's really nice there. So I managed to get a job in procurement in Vodafone and moved us back again to Luxembourg.
So she followed you this time?
This time she followed me. She was able to get a job back at the European Court. Mm-hmm. I had a big fallout with my parents. They weren't happy with me moving away from the UK. I don't think we talked for about 6 months. So yeah, that was another factor going on as well, that kind of guilt as well, moving away.
Did that conversation and guilt happen the first time you moved to Luxembourg, or was it just the second time?
I think it was more the second time. The first time, yeah, maybe, in hindsight, I guess I did move quite abruptly, and we could have thought about the impact on wider people. Having a younger brother who's disabled, I think having the family nearby, just in case something happens, was always a concern. So the second time we moved back to Luxembourg, I was moving away, and maybe it's going to be for longer, the kids going into like a whole school system, which is how it's turned out.
Yeah, I share your guilt. I think any of us who live away from our families have always got that at the back of our minds, haven't we? So what year did you come back?
2012.
2012. So what happened then?
Yeah, so I was at Vodafone for a year, then met a parent of one of my kids' friends, and he was working at Amazon. And I thought, when I was previously in Luxembourg, Amazon was 40 people and it was much smaller. Now it's 2,500 people and much bigger. And it seemed like this amazing. It is an amazing place to work, but it seemed from the outside like an even better place to work. So in 2013, I got a job at Amazon here in Luxembourg as a senior product manager. That was exciting. Immediately having to go to India and Seattle, first time I'd ever been to America. So yeah, a very different kind of work style to a European company, but that was the next step.
The next step. So product manager. You seem to have moved away. I know when you talked about your school, it was maths, physics, and art, but then you go on a route that's marketing and product, and I feel you've moved away from that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, wanting to go into art and then thinking about advertising, then marketing, then product, and then, going into commercial finance and procurement, it's really going into business, isn't it? And very different from maybe the creative arts. I know obviously there's commercial arts, but, and sure, there's, with maths is used a lot in marketing and product. Definitely at Amazon, maths is really important. In physics, you might say, well, that's some understanding of technology, but I can't say that I've really applied much of the physics I've used in my working life.
Nor me.
And even I forgot to mention, when I was early in my career at Vodafone, there was an opportunity to apply to do an MBA. Before I met my wife, I planned out my week and I thought, okay, I can make the time to study this. And I applied and they said, no, we think you're too junior and your role's not strategic enough for this to be useful. I was like, oh, and I was like, well, I've planned all this time to study now. Maybe I can do something else instead. So that started my first experience with the Open University. 20 years ago, getting into humanities. There was a course called Words and Sounds, looking at literature, looking at music, then got me into like introduction to the humanities and, doing philosophy, now doing English literature. So now doing courses with Oxford University, Anglo-Saxon literature on Jane Austen. So getting more into that creative side. So, still interested in art, looking at literature as another way of creating kind of images and emotions.
I wonder if that's an age thing as well, this art, this sounds, words, because I know that Audible, I'm addicted to Audible, and now it's just given me Audible Plus and loads of classics that are for free, and these famous people that are reading them, so I'm sat listening to Dickens, and I have to confess I only knew Dickens from the series or the films.
I've been listening to Seamus Heaney's poems on Audible, but with a story, I start to fall asleep in the car if I've listened to kind of a relaxing voice. But Audible is great. Language and literature were my worst subjects at GCSE. I got the lowest grade in them, and I think having some life experience does make you appreciate it more.
I'm watching a Korean drama at the moment, and one thing I've realised is that people are people, no matter where they are. Mm-hmm. So we've digressed. We've digressed. We actually met because I was in the People in Leadership group of the British Chamber, and members of that group said, oh, you need to meet Brian Ballantyne. We think he would be great to come into that. So that's where I met you. Mm-hmm. You're still in Amazon, but now your role has changed quite fundamentally. I see that you're in training and programs. So what prompted that move?
Yeah, it's interesting because going from product and marketing, I took a sabbatical, went traveling around India and Malaysia with my family, and then thought, I'm kind of bored of marketing really. And my job at the time was to get more and more companies to sell their product on Amazon. And after 4 years of doing that, I got to the point where I didn't care. I don't really care if one extra company sold their products on Amazon. There was already, I felt, enough. I think what I cared about was more diversity and equality. It's something I'd always volunteered in as a sideline, setting up the Women's Network at Amazon in Luxembourg, set up various groups at Amazon worldwide. And I always thought, well, maybe I need to work in that area. Everyone always told me, there's this diversity job, why don't you go for it? And I always thought, no, that's my voluntary sideline. So I thought, well, let's try it out. So I had the chance to be the diversity lead for international technology at Amazon for a couple of years. And while that was good, I realized that it's quite difficult to make changes from the sideline. And I probably had more power as a manager to actually influence promotion of people, the hiring of people, making sure that was fair. And I think also I was getting a bit disillusioned. I went to Women in Technology in Amsterdam, and there was 2,000 women in an auditorium, maybe 20 men, all being told the value of women in technology, and they're all nodding. And I thought, well, of course they already know it. And they were like, why aren't the men here? And it's like, well, it's women in technology. Of course the men aren't here. unless they're kind of allies or interested. So I just thought this needs to get into the mainstream. Diversity can't just be something that's talked about. Women's conferences, it needs to be in the mainstream. So that's why I'd already volunteered as part of this software development conference at Amazon, and I was organising a track around career development, and I made sure there was a good balance of doing workshops and doing panels, more so than anyone else was doing. And it was in the mainstream. This wasn't a sideline diversity conference. This was the conference all the developers had to go to. 85% men had to kind of listen to women on the stage and see them as role models. So I thought maybe this is an area I can explore. So this is the role I'm doing now. It's about training, but my side agenda is to make sure that there is an equality and a diversity of experts that we put in front of 10,000 new Amazon engineers every year, that we put on the stage at conferences, that there is accessible learning experiences. That I manage quite a diverse team, predominantly women. Most of them are not native English speakers, from different cultures, and promoted 4 of them, hiring new people, kind of role modeling to others. So people say, aren't you interested in diversity anymore because you're not working in a diversity role? But I think I'm having more of an impact in the role I'm in now, in kind of mainstream. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
I was thinking about this whole idea of influence and how can you have influence? And you gave some thought as to where could you have the most influence whilst following what it was you really wanted to do. And for me, it's great to have International Women's Day, but as you say, you call it Women's Day, and of course, only women show up usually. So this moved you, I guess. Let's move into you deciding to set up something that would support women, but it was by men. So talk me through that.
Yeah, this was interesting. And I guess the background is that, at Amazon, I was being asked to do male allies talks. Now, I never thought of myself as a male ally. I don't think it's a great word for men. I don't think it's a great word for women. Women don't need rescuing, and men don't need to be, told they need to rescue women either. But still, I was being asked to do these talks like, now you're an ally for women. What are some tips that you got for other men so they can do the same? So I was asked to go and do a talk in Madrid, and then asked to do this talk in Virginia, and then, in Berlin. So it was mainly a lot of storytelling with a few tips I'd found useful. And women were challenging me, saying, it's not enough that you're an ally. You need to get more men to be allies. And, I've always wanted to listen to women's suggestions. I was like, okay, fine. I don't really embrace this whole male ally thing, but let's give it a try. So I set up a group on LinkedIn called Male Allies Network, or MAN, and just put it out there and invited all the men in my connections I thought could be interested. And then nothing much happened, as is the way with male ally groups. People they set it up and they want, sometimes maybe want the badge of honor, or generally might care but don't really know what to do. And as with men, as with other dads, we don't really know what to talk about, whereas women are maybe better at that. But still, so I left the group and really thought nothing of it for a while. Then a guy called Gary Ford got in contact. He was a former managing director at JP Morgan, and he and Stephen Kosh had a lot of success there running, Male Allies Network and trained thousands of men at JP Morgan. And he was like, I've been posting in your group and no one's responding. And I think there's a thing with LinkedIn groups where you don't get notified or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. Let's have a chat then. And we talked about maybe working together on a male allies kind of initiative. First of all, we were thinking of call it Male Allies for Gender Equality, or MAGE, like a male wizard kind of thing. But when we started doing some events, Gary was already working with Women on the Wharf, in London, which is a women's network around the financial institutions. And we started doing some events. And then, I said for our first event, let's ask the question, do we really need Male Allies Network? People who self-selected to join voted that we did. And then we kind of broadened, we got more people involved. We changed our name, Let's Be Men for Inclusion. So not just this kind of male ally thing. And also thinking as well, we wanted to move away from being entertainment, getting people to put the money where their mouth was, and go into organizations, do workshops, something Gary had already been doing. Just change the way we think about diversity. It's not just free TED Talks or free posts or events where everyone's welcome. It's something companies have to pay for and put the time in. And again, there's that guilt, like, how can we as white men be taking money to improve diversity? But again, that's what people need to do. And we're trying to, not necessarily role model that, but I'm seeing more friends, women of Black women, setting up their own consultancies now, charging for it, because I think that's the problem with the diversity, is it's basically extra overhead for women and minorities to do, while men just stand on the sidelines. So that's a little introduction for Men for Inclusion, and yeah, we're just starting to experiment now. We know every 3 months we see if we're making progress. There's various companies, working with HSBC, working with other companies who maybe doing one-off workshops. We're just looking for a deeper engagement where companies are prepared to invest the time and the money. So yeah, it's still exploratory, but I think that's where we are with it.
I've been interested in gender equality for a while, and one thing that always surprised me was, how are we still in this mess? Because we're actually not a minority, are we? We're 50%.
51% even. The world's customers, who makes all the purchase decisions? 60 to 80% women are making the biggest commercial force. So yeah, as you say, women aren't a minority.
No, we're not. You also raised this issue about, should we make money out of something that is for good, for the common good? And very often I've had to give myself a good talking to, because coaching is similar. And I think to myself, yes, but there's lots of professions that are doing good. The medical profession and this, that, the other, and they're paid and expect to be paid. So do you have profit or do you have values? And maybe we could combine the two.
Yeah, I think so. It's something I'm exploring with Wide. Here in Luxembourg, we have Women for Digital Empowerment. I've been on the board of Wide for 7 years, and it's always been a non-profit, subsidized to a small extent by the government, but often taken for granted. And I think, even with Wide, we're looking at, do we want to move to a commercial model? Because I think it's about, the most important thing is the impact, because these groups are set up to make an impact. And if they're done pro bono, if it's all for free, it's all taken for granted. If companies aren't putting money and time into it, then I don't think they're really taking it seriously. So it's not just about making money. Not not expecting to make money, as much money from this startup, but you never know, and why not? It's work, it's effort, it's expertise. That's our starting position. But yeah, go into these companies, if they pay a lot for other things, why don't they pay a lot for this? I think that's what they need to do if they really want to walk the talk and not just get a badge for good behavior.
Summing up then, as you've heard yourself talk, are there any key moments or anything that you think that was a real learning point for me?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've just listened on Audible to Kazuo Ishiguro's Remains of the Day, when the butler looks back on his life and realizes he's been working for a Nazi sympathizer and, he missed out on the love of his life. So it's not as bad as that. It's not as bleak as that. What stands out? As you said, maybe have I got away from what I set out to do? I started out maybe being creative, and have I lost sight of that? And I think my career has been all over the place, but I think life is all over the place. And jumping to Luxembourg, changing from marketing to finance, back to marketing to procurement, to now to training. But as you said, just like with life, a lot of literature, there's a lot of similarities in people. And I think in jobs, there's a lot of similarity. If you can work with people and work with projects, and you can usually get things done. And it's interesting the way we think about our lives as well. I think we know that we're focusing on the career for these big names like Heinz and Vodafone and Amazon, which has look good on a CV, but why is that more important than books that we're reading or hobbies that we're doing or voluntary work? And I really like the idea of this kind of portfolio career, including education and lifelong learning. That's why on LinkedIn I put co-founder of Men for Inclusion, because that's what's interesting. And by the way, I work for one of the most successful companies in the world as an afterthought. So there's a kind of tongue-in-cheek there, but I don't need to define myself because I work for Amazon. Maybe there's things in my life I've made quick decisions on. Maybe I could have reflected more. And I think I've done a lot of work to kind of process trauma and process guilt as well. And I don't feel guilty anymore. I feel like we have to live our lives. And, I wish I'd had some of that, counseling and support, at a younger age. But, we learn life's lessons, and, I am where I am. And I hopefully still got some years ahead to keep doing other things and keep exploring what I'm passionate about.
Because passion really comes out when I listen to you. So, and you talked about portfolio of work, which I think is the way we're going. No longer can we rely on a job for life or just one thing. And I like this idea of doing all different things. You've also shown a tendency to live like, why not? I've heard a lot of, that sounds interesting, why not? And just moved. which I suppose shows the creative, spontaneous side of things. I also heard where you start isn't where you end up. I saw a lot on Twitter recently about A-level results, and I just wanted to say to people how little that they're not so important the older you get. It's what did you do last week? I actually like the word ally.
Okay.
I think ally is not about rescuer. I've just been to Normandy.
Yeah, I was thinking about the military allies as well.
Yeah, I think in this world we all need allies. So I love what you do, this Men for Inclusion, and the fact that it's unfolding.
It's exciting.
Yes, it's exciting. And it's been a fascinating, quick run through your life. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jill.
Where can they find Men for Inclusion? Have you got a website?
Yeah, we have. Maybe the easiest is to go via LinkedIn. Going through LinkedIn, you can find me, and there's a link there to the group.
Okay, that's lovely. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Jill.
Yeah, I never know how to close this off.
Do a little song.
Maybe we could do a little song and dance.